Playoff baseball, the battlegrounds of giants, all fighting for the World Series crown, where heavyweight gladiators meet Cinderella hopefuls. But what about the teams that shouldn't be here at all? Hello, my name is Avery Taylor and I'll be taking you through the worst teams to make the postseason since 2000. If you like this sort of content, please be sure to hit the like and subscribe, and let's get right into it.
I love you.
COVID wrecked much of society and turned the world and baseball into a confusing place. Tiger King took center stage, the runner on second rule came into play, and journeyman Jed Jerko outperformed Christian Yelich, who performed within the top two of MVP voting each of the 2 years prior. On top of that, the Brewers made the playoffs despite having a losing record by grace of the expanded playoff. They made it as the 8th seed versus the super team of the Los Angeles Dodgers. Unfortunately for the Brewers, this wasn't the Cinderella story they were hoping for, as their 27th ranked offense came back to bite them, only scoring 2 runs across 2 games. Downticks from key offensive performers like Yelich and Braun were ultimately the downfall of this team. A team that stumbled into the postseason virtually a poor division, much like the previously mentioned Brewers, the 2005 Padres weren't this bad by accident. The projected totals had them well below a winning record, and the team really only had one solid pitcher on the roster in Jake Peavy. On top of that, the lineup had a few holes to say at least. Brian Giles was fantastic in his age 34 season, while Dave Roberts, yes, that Dave Roberts, Ryan Klesko, and Ramon Hernandez were all around league average from the offensive side. That's all there is really to speak positively for this team. The team entered the divisional round as heavy underdogs facing the St. Louis Cardinals, who not only had the Cy Young winner that season in Chris Carpenter and MVP winner in Albert Pujols, they also had what I shall call the geriatric row with 37-year-old Reggie Sanders, 35-year-old Jim Edmonds, and 38-year-old Larry Walker, providing much-needed protection in the middle of that Cardinals lineup. Much like the 2020 Brewers, the Padres just didn't have the talent to keep pace with the star-studded Cardinals roster and got swept in 3 games. Alright, that's enough of this lack of playoff success. You clicked on this video to see the teams that were poor in the regular season and overcame that adversity to win in the postseason. So let's take a look at a recent example from just last season in the Philadelphia Phillies. At a passing glance, it is easy to see this team was much more well-rounded than the previous 2. With 6 players in the starting lineup deemed to be a league average hitter or better, with 2 workhorse pitchers heading a solid pitching staff top to bottom, a lot of this team's struggles came early in the season, which eventually led to the firing of manager Joe Girardi and moving to interim manager Rob Thompson. The team responded by going 65-46 over the last 111 games to secure the 3rd and final wildcard spot in the National League, a slot that had just been added earlier that season. In the wildcard series, the Phillies faced off against the St. Louis Cardinals, who won the NL Central with a 93-69 record. Game 1 was looking dominant from the Cardinals until closer Ryan Helsley relinquished 4 runs, including this 2-run single from Gene Segura, which flipped the game on its head. Zach Eflin finished the game, and the Phillies had stolen Game 1 right from the Cardinals' grasp. Then in Game 2, the Phillies turned the ball over to Aaron Nola, who proceeded to dominate the Cardinals for much of the game. Pitching a shutout with 6 strikeouts across 6 2/3 inning, the bullpen picked up right where he had left off, and with a Bryce Harper home run, the series belonged to the Phillies. The divisional series was against none other than divisional rival and winner, the Atlanta Braves. The Phillies jumped out to a big lead in Game 1, virtually with some clutch hitting from Nick Castellanos and Alec Boehm, who powered the Phillies out to a 7-1 lead in the 5th inning. The Braves ultimately did make it interesting, grabbing 7 runs down the stretch against the Phillies bullpen, but ultimately the Phillies put out the game 7-6. In Game 2, the Braves put on a pitching clinic, pitching a combined shutout, only allowing 3 hits. However, the first playoff game of the season back in Philadelphia, the Phillies dominated the Braves, including 2 electric home runs from Rhys Hopkins and Bryce Harper, and the Phils closed out the game 9-1. In Game 4, the Phillies took an early lead again, jumping ahead by 3 in the 2nd inning. And after some back and forth in the middle innings, the Phillies broke out the game wide open in the 6th to advance to the championship series after a series clinching win of 8-3. In the championship series, the Phillies faced another Cinderella team in their own right in the San Diego Padres, who had fought through the Mets and Dodgers to reach this point. The Phillies turned to the first piece of their 2-headed monster in Zach Wheeler, who pitched a gem against a stacked Padres lineup. He threw 7 innings of shutout ball, collecting 8 strikeouts. The Phillies didn't get much run support, but they did get a couple runs virtue of the long ball from Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber, meaning the Phillies claimed Game 1. Game 2 was much more of an offensive affair, with the Phillies grabbing an early lead with 4 runs in the 2nd, but after a meltdown from Aaron Nola in the 5th, the Phillies ultimately lost Game 2 with a final of 8-5. Game 3 was a little bit of everything. The Phillies got a quality start out of Ranger Suarez, and a leadoff home run from Kyle Schwarber gave the Phillies an early advantage. And after a 2-run single by John Segura, the game was put away by the Phillies bullpen, securing a Game 3 victory of 4-2. Game 4 was not so much of a clean game, with a combined 7 runs being scored in the first inning, After some back and forth in the middle innings, the Phillies once again flipped the game on its head with one swing of the bat with a 2-run bomb in the 5th inning from Rhys Hopkins. The Phillies tacked on 2 more runs in the inning and never relented the lead, meaning the Phillies were 1 game away from the World Series. However, in Game 5, the Padres are looking to play spoiler with a 2 spot in the top of the 7th to take the lead, which led to this epic moment.
Flores delivers, swing and a drive, left field, it's deep, it's going, yes! And it is gone! Yes! Yes! It is bedlam at the bank as Bryce Harper has put the Phillies on top!
That swing put the Phillies squarely in the World Series against the Houston Astros. Game 1 was not the pitching duel that everyone expected, with both starters being tagged for 5 runs. But that would be the only run surrendered until the top of the 10th, where JT Realmuto cranked this home run off of Luis Garcia to take the lead in the game and short while later in the series. The Astros came back with a vengeance in Game 2, grabbing an early 3-0 lead and eventually winning the game 5-2 behind a strong start from Framber Valdez. Back in the Philly for Game 3, the Phillies needed to make a statement early, and Bryce Harper did just that. The Phillies went on to win Game 3 with another strong start from Ranger Suarez. Houston responded in kind during Game 4, posting a 5 spot in the 5th inning and eventually going on to win the game by a score of 5-0. In a pivotal Game 5, it came down to a pitcher's duel, and with the Astros rolling out Justin Verlander and the Phillies rolling out Noah Syndergaard, it ultimately proved to be the slight difference in the game, with the Astros grabbing Game 5 at a 3-2 scoreline. With Game 6 back in Houston, the wind seemed to be out of the Phillies' sails, and they eventually lost the game and ultimately the series, and ultimately proved that it just takes making it to the dance to have a chance to walk away victorious. But what if I told you there's a team that had an even crazier story than last year's Phillies? I'm talking about the 2006 St. Louis Cardinals. Geriatric Row was no more. The fearsome pitching staff was not the same, and the team had won 17 less games as a result. The team was ravished by injuries to key players down the stretch, and the cracks of the teams were showing. The team limped into the playoffs with an 83-78 record, winning an abysmal NL Central and getting a reunion with the Padres. Much like the series the year prior, the Cardinals made quick work of the Padres, getting a big series from the usual suspects of Albert Pujols, who went 5 for 15 with 3 RBIs, as well as Chris Carpenter, who pitched 2 out of the 4 games, giving up only 3 runs and 13 innings of work. The Cardinals also got a big series from Ronnie Biard, who went 6 for 13 with 2 RBIs, but relatively, the Padres still had a ways to go to be an elite team, so the Cardinals were very fortunate to have them as a first-round opponent. The championship series would provide the Cardinals with a true test with the New York Mets, who won 97 games and were the clear number 1 seed in the National League. Unfortunately for the Cardinals, 40-year-old Tom Glavine turned back the clock just in time for Game 1 and dominated the Cardinals for 7 innings, only giving up 4 hits en route to a shutout, capped off by Billy Wagner picking up the save. In Game 2, the Cardinals turned to Chris Carpenter, who changed their fortunes in the series, and he really didn't deliver, giving up 5 runs in 5 innings. Luckily, the Cardinals' offense answered the call to action, and with a tied game in the top of the 9th, the Mets once again turned to mainstay reliever Billy Wagner. This time, the Cardinals were ready. With 3 runs in the top of the 9th, the Cardinals escaped New York with a tied series on 1 game apiece. With a series headed back to St. Louis, the Cardinals used the newfound momentum to jump on Game 3 starter Steve Trachsel with 5 runs in the first 2 innings, which continued as the score to the final. Game 4 saw the Mets return to form, thrashing every pitcher the Cardinals put onto the mound, with the eventual score being 12-5, setting up a pivotal Game 5. In Game 5, the Mets turned the ball to Tom Glavine, who didn't find the same success, getting the boot after 4 innings of 3-run ball. The Cardinals tacked on another run in the 6th inning and held the lead for then rookie Adam Wainwright to pick up the save in place of Jason Isringhausen, who picked up an injury in mid-September. With Game 6 back in New York and the momentum back on St. Louis' side, the Cardinals turned to trusty Chris Carpenter, or so they thought. Once again, Carpenter was tagged early, and the Cardinals were unable to support him to get back into the game. The Cardinals did make another late run at Billy Wagner, but ultimately it was too little too late. Game 7 came down to a pitching duel between Jeff Supin and Oliver Perez. Both pitchers kept 1-run games going late into the games, where the bullpens continued that trend till the top of the 9th inning, where we found ourselves in the 1-1 game. The Mets elected to go with Aaron Hillman in place of Billy Wagner due to his struggles against the Cardinals previously in the series and having pitched so much the day before. Here's where one of the first instances of Yadier Molina's legendary career was born.
He hits it in the air to left field. Back is Chavez. At the wall, this ball is gone. 2-run home run, Yadier Molina.
The Cardinals went on to finish the game off with rookie Adam Wainwright, and all of a sudden, the Cardinals were headed to the World Series and had beaten their performance from the previous playoffs, where they had won 100 games. With 1 more series to go, they had to face the American League winners and the Detroit Tigers coming off a sweep of the Oakland A's. However, the lack of time off seemed to favor the Cardinals, who tagged a young Justin Verlander for 7 runs across 5 innings, whilst getting a much-needed 8 innings out of starter Anthony Reyes. In Game 2, the Tigers returned the favor, getting a gem out of Kenny Rogers, who also went 8 innings strong, tying the series at 1 apiece. But the series headed back to St. Louis. The Cardinals turned Old Faithful on Chris Carpenter, and he delivered in a big way, pitching 8 innings of shutout ball, which the Cardinals finally backed by giving him 5 runs of support and moved the series in the Cardinals' favor 2-1. Game 4 was a feisty one, with the Tigers grabbing an early 3-0 lead in the top of the 3rd, only for the Cardinals to answer with 4 unanswered runs through the bottom of the 7th. In the top of the 8th, and a runner on second, manager Tony La Russa turned to rookie Adam Wainwright to get a multi-inning save to winning the game. Wainwright repaid La Russa by instantly giving up a game-tying double to Brandon Inge. Wainwright managed to calm down and get the next 2 batters to strike out, but the damage had already been done. In the bottom of the 8th, David Eckstein did the unimaginable. That score put the Cardinals back up heading into the 9th, where La Russa once again trusted his young right-hander to get the job done. Wainwright induced a strikeout and 2 grounders to take the series 3-1. With the opportunity to close the series on 5, the Cardinals jumped out to an early lead in the 2nd with an infield signal. The Tigers weren't done as they grabbed 2 themselves in the top of the 4th, off a home run from Sean Casey. The Tigers couldn't celebrate for long as the Cardinals returned the favor in the bottom of the frame, grabbing 2 themselves, re-establishing their lead. The Cardinals tacked on another in the bottom of the 7th from a Scott Rowland single, pushing their lead to 4-2. And with the series in the balance, La Russa turned back to the young right-hander Adam Wainwright. Wainwright didn't falter, striking out Brandon Inge to claim the World Series for St. Louis, a team that limped into the playoffs on an 83-78 record, which had multiple cracks in the roster due to injury and lack of player retention that found a way to get magical performances from otherwise obscure players in the grand scheme of things. And that's what makes playoff baseball so magical.